In the season before certain NFL drafts, you'll see this phenomenon in particular at the quarterback position. You'll see certain guys get a lot of attention, get a lot of media buzz. They'll be very popular top 10 or first round mock draft selections pretty much across the board in terms of the NFL mock draft media. But then as the season goes along, these guys that have gotten a lot of that buzz start to kind of come back down to earth a little bit, and the hype kind of dies down and more of reality sets in. But then there will be this guy that kind of comes out of nowhere that really didn't get much of any buzz whatsoever. But as the season goes along, it starts to get some attention, starts to get people to take notice of them, in particular in the scouting community. And all of a sudden, these guys end up going as high, if not higher, than a lot of these more highly touted prospects. Now, in this year's draft cycle, I think you see this play out with guys like Connor Cook and Christian Hackenberg and Cardale Jones. If you go back almost a year ago, a lot of 2016 mock drafts would have had 1, 2, or all 3 of these guys going in round number 1. But the reality is that none of these guys might end up going round number 1 come April. But there will be 1 or 2 other guys that weren't even on the radars for a lot of people that will end up going high and much higher than those guys that I just named. It's similar to what happened in 2014 in the build-up to that draft. That season before, the talk was about Teddy Bridgewater and Johnny Manziel. And then all of a sudden here along comes Blake Bortles, and he ends up going 3rd overall to the Jaguars. He's the first quarterback taken. 2012, all the talk about Andrew Luck and Robert Griffin III. And what did you know? By the time all is said and done, Ryan Tannehill ends up going 8th overall to the Miami Dolphins. I even go all the way back to the 2005 draft. And in the season building up to that, there was a lot of talk about Aaron Rodgers and where he could end up being. But when all was said and done, it was not Aaron Rodgers, but Alex Smith that went number 1 overall to the San Francisco 49ers. There's other history of this throughout the years. Brady Quinn, heading into the season before the 2007 draft, was going to be that dude. And it ended up being Jamarcus Russell going number 1 overall. This stuff happens. It happens from time to time. And I think another example of this happening this year could be with Paxton Lynch. And Paxton Lynch most certainly fits into that category for this year's draft. The 6'7", 240-pound redshirt junior out of Memphis has made his intentions to declare for the 2016 NFL Draft well known. And before the 2015 college football season, there wasn't a lot of hype about him. There wasn't a lot of buzz surrounding him. There weren't people talking about him. But as the season went along, he started to make a name for himself. He started to get noticed. People took notice. And now you'll see in a lot of mock drafts out there, at least at this moment, that Paxton Lynch is the number 1 quarterback going off of the board. Now, this happens some years. So when you look at Paxton Lynch, why are people so high on him, and why do so many people think that he has this big-time NFL potential as a starting quarterback, and why would teams potentially want to invest a top 10, if not a top 5, or even with the Cleveland Browns case, a number 2 overall pick in him? Well, let's look at some of the strengths of his game. First, you got to look at the physical measurables. 6'7", 240 pounds. This is a big dude, and you would think, in theory, that he would be able to handle the rigors of a 16-game NFL season. And he's not only just 6'7", but at 240 pounds, he's pretty well put together. He doesn't need to add a ton of muscle for the NFL level, similar to what a Jared Goff might need to do. And you see this a lot of times with these bigger quarterbacks. Sometimes they're really built and sometimes they're not. In Paxton Lynch's case, he's got NFL size to him. And beyond that, you look at his mobility and his athleticism. What's really impressive when you watch him and what kind of jumps out to you a lot is his natural athleticism for a guy of that size, 6'7", 240 pounds. You almost think because of his size and his athleticism, he could bulk up just a little bit more and be an effective tight end at the NFL level. That's how athletic this kid is. And you see that athleticism in his ability to move on his feet as a quarterback. I mean, he has the ability with that big frame to roll out to the right, to roll out to the left, to move within the pocket. I mean, it's really impressive to watch a guy this big be able to move around like this and make throws on the move, to rolling to his right, rolling to his left, and be able to see at Memphis how he was utilizing the spread option game, and the fact that this is a guy that could pick up some yards with his feet and isn't afraid to pick up some yards with his feet. You don't see that out of guys that size all the time. And then, of course, with that size, you would hope that he has a big-time arm, and Paxton Lynch shows that functional arm strength to easily, comfortably make every required throw at the NFL level. There are times you watch Paxton Lynch make some throws and you say, this dude's got a hose, this dude's got a cannon. Now, when I watched him in the bowl game against Auburn, I was wondering where some of that arm strength was. It just wasn't showing up like it had during different points in time in the season. But when he's right, and when he set himself up properly, he can make some big-time throws, and he's got a rocket for an arm, so he can fit some balls into some tight spaces. I also like his short-range accuracy. From 0 to 10 yards, he's really good. He has a good ability to find the soft spot in the zone in that short-range area. He has the ability to throw a guy open. He has the ability to hit the guy in the right spot. 0 to 10 yards, he's a really, really accurate passer. And again, I come back to the fact that with that size and that arm strength, he also has the ability to move. He can be a hard quarterback to game plan for because of that size and that athleticism and that arm strength. But there are some other things that make you wonder, why all of a sudden are we just now finding out about this guy, and why all of a sudden is he just getting this big, massive buzz? Did he make this much of an improvement? Is he really, truly this great of a prospect? Or are there some serious and significant question marks about his game? Well, I think there are some serious and significant question marks about his game that make me wonder if people are just falling in love with the guy because he is 6'7", 240 pounds and can move, or if they think that these areas of weakness aren't that big of a deal. Because frankly, I think some of them really truly are, and suggest that he's not really nearly as ready for the NFL level as some might like to make you believe. No matter how good the prospect is, they're always going to have something they can get better at. There's always going to be something that could be potentially some type of weakness or shortcoming at the NFL level. The sometimes important thing, though, to me is what type of weaknesses do they have, how prevalent are they, how significant or deep-rooted are they, and how easily can they or can they not be fixed. When it comes to quarterbacks, one of those things that I don't like to be a huge weakness in a guy, in particular more so when we're talking about drafting a guy in the first round or especially in the top half of round one, especially once you get into the top 10 territory, are things regarding football IQ and instincts and feel for the position. If a guy struggles in that area, it could lead me to have some real pause about them as a prospect. And two of Paxton Lynch's biggest areas for growth and improvement, I think, are in terms of football IQ and instincts. And here's what I mean. In terms of his field vision, I think this is a guy that's gotten a little bit better in terms of being able to go off of just his primary read. But based off of the system that he ran at Memphis, that he was in under head coach Justin Fuente, there was a lot of one read and throw or run type of situations. He didn't have a lot of situations on a consistent basis where he had to move safeties with his eyes, where he had to go off of his primary to a secondary and then a third and maybe a check down option. It was a lot of one read and throw or one read and run. So, when it comes to these guys at the NFL level, is it sometimes just because of the system that they played in? Is it sometimes because of the conference that they played in or the defenses that they faced? They didn't have to be much more than one read guys? Or is it a situation of, in terms of the mental aptitude for the position, in terms of a football IQ standpoint, can they not effectively process the ability to see the field in a timely fashion where they could go through progressions, where they could break down a defense with their eyes, where they could see what's going on, and in a lot of cases, more importantly, see what's happening before it actually does officially happen. And then when you look at it from a feel and instincts type of standpoint, I look at pocket presence. That's something that I'm usually very big on. And if a guy has it, that tends to bode well for potential future success at the NFL level. And if they don't, sometimes you can't work on this stuff. And sometimes you can, but sometimes you can't. It could come to confidence. It could come to any number of things. But I look at Paxton Lynch's pocket presence. I don't want to make you think that it's terrible on the same level of a Brett Hundley, or especially if you remember years back what I talked about with Blaine Gabbert. But there are times to me where Paxton Lynch, in the face of pressure coming either from the side or straight ahead of him, he just freezes. He doesn't always do a good job of moving within the pocket or moving up and down the pocket. Sometimes he does, and sometimes he does a really good job of that. But he's very inconsistent in that way. And even more so to me, sometimes it's that feel of knowing where the pressure is coming from and avoiding it before it even gets there. I don't really see that in his game. And also the pocket presence in terms of knowing when it's time to move up, move left or right, but stay within the confines of the pocket, or just stand tall and you've got to take the hit. A lot of times when I saw Paxton Lynch on film, I saw a guy that was very quick to break down his protection. He was very quick to break out of the pocket as soon as any pass rush was there whatsoever, and you're just not going to consistently be successful at the NFL level doing that. And at 6'7", 240 pounds even, you're still exposing yourself to a greater chance at injury by always trying to break the contain of your pass protection and trying to scramble outside of the pocket to extend plays. You can create penalties for your offensive line. You could do all types of different things by doing that. So those are some major concerns. But I also look at his throwing ability. And I talked about his functional arm strength and his fundamental arm strength, and he's got it. But like I said, when I looked at the Auburn Bowl game, he looked like he had a noodle arm. Maybe it was just a different perspective on that particular game. Maybe it was because I was watching it live as opposed to the other Paxton Lynch film I've watched for the past 2 years. I've been watching after the fact. I can loop it and watch it multiple times. But real time, real speed, when I was watching Paxton Lynch, I said, where's the arm strength? It doesn't look like he has that much. But it's more so than that. I think he still fundamentally has that arm strength. To me, it's a lack of understanding in terms of what type of velocity, to use on the ball and in what situations. I think his understanding of using touch and feel when it comes to his throws is very, very, very lacking. Is very lacking. He's like that pitcher that comes out of the bullpen and the only thing he could throw is one speed of a fastball and that's it. He can't change velocity or location of the fastball. He doesn't throw an effective changeup. Eventually, no matter how fast you throw the ball, people are going to catch up with it and eventually you're going to get shelled. When it comes to quarterbacks, though, you have to have that ability to mix up how you throw the ball. Sometimes it's going to require you to put more arc on it. Sometimes you got to put a little bit of arc on it. Sometimes you've got to just hang it up in the air for a long time. Sometimes you do have to put it on a rope. Sometimes you got to throw it to a specific spot. At times, I think his throwing touch and his feel are very, very lacking. He tends to be one speed, one velocity, one arc with his throws, and that's concerning to me, as is his deep ball accuracy. Now, like I said before, his short range accuracy from 0 to 10 yards is very, very good. Once you get into the intermediate, and in particular the deep area of the field, his deep ball accuracy is very, very poor. It's very, very lacking, and it's something he's going to work on. Now, it tends to be when it comes to the physical aspects in terms of understanding when to throw with touch and feel and being able to have more accuracy in the intermediate and deep passing game. That tends to be things that you can work on, but there's still a feel there. There's still an instinct there that goes along with some of that. And when you throw in the fact that you're talking about maybe some concerns about level of competition, not to the same level of, let's say, a Carson Wentz, but the fact is he didn't exactly play in a powerhouse conference. And when you look at it, he had some good games. He had a notable performance against Ole Miss when they had just come off of beating Alabama. But then again, when he played another SEC defense in a bowl game, this time in Auburn, he looked mediocre. And in no way, shape, or form did he look like a first-round quarterback prospect. So I think some teams are going to look a little deeper at the film and see if some of his success and some of his statistics came as a result of the quality of his play or more so the inferiority of the defenses that he played against. Now, to me, like I've mentioned before, when talking about Goff, when talking about Wentz, I'm very big, especially at the quarterback position, with player comparisons because it can give you a projection of the potential of that guy perhaps at the NFL level. Now, you'll see different comparisons, I think, for Paxton Lynch. One of them is going to be Brock Osweiler because they're both 6'7" and they have strong arms. To me, that's where some of the similarities end. I could see it to a degree, but I don't think it's the best or most appropriate comparison. I think, frankly, the comparison is kind of lazy. Then you'll hear some comparisons to Blake Bortles, and I don't think it's a terrible comparison, but he's bigger than Blake Bortles. He's more athletic than Blake Bortles, and I most certainly think he has a stronger arm than Blake Bortles did coming out of Central Florida. So when looking at Paxton Lynch and trying to figure out who he most closely resembles or he most reminds me of as a prospect coming out of college, the guy that he actually reminded me of, believe it or not, was Cam Newton, who was selected number 1 overall by the Carolina Panthers coming out of Auburn. Two guys with immense physical tools. Big size. Lynch is even taller than Cam Newton. He's not quite as big, but Paxton Lynch is no slouch. He's pretty well put together. Guys that are incredibly athletic and mobile. Now, granted, Paxton Lynch is not quite the athlete of Cam Newton, but he's no slouch himself. In terms of arm strength, I think Cam's arm is a little bit stronger, but Paxton Lynch at times has showed me that type of arm strength. But they both, as prospects, have room to grow as pocket passers, and they're both guys that are going to require patience. They're going to require commitment from an organization and a coaching staff, and they're going to require time, because you're going to have those games where they look like they're gods, and then you're going to have, because of their physical tools and some of the big plays they can make with their arm and with their feet. But then they're going to have other games where, from an IQ and instinct standpoint for the quarterback position, they're going to be really, really challenged. And as a result, I think a guy like Paxton Lynch is a little bit more of a project than some people are making him out to be, similar to how Cam Newton, I talked about heading into the 2011 draft, where the Carolina Panthers had to draft him because given that time, he was going to be that guy that we are seeing here in this 2015 NFL season. But at the end of the day, it took time, it took patience, it took a commitment to him. It took time for him to develop to become that guy. And there were moments where things looked great with Cam, and there were other moments that were kind of ugly. And I envision a lot of the same, especially early on in the career of Paxton Lynch as well. And that's why I think the comparison, while not perfect with Cam Newton, I think is more appropriate than a lot of people might want to make you believe. So even with some of the concerns I have about Paxton Lynch and his football IQ, his readiness to lead an NFL franchise from a maturity leadership standpoint, but also in terms of a quarterbacking standpoint, there's a lot of upside there. There are a lot of intriguing tools there. And there's a lot of potential there for this guy to be potentially a big star at the NFL level. However, at the end of the day, I still think he's only the third best quarterback prospect available in this 2016 NFL draft. I see great physical tools that surely will intrigue teams, but he's a guy that's going to need work on the mental aspects of the game and the instinctual aspects of the game. He needs to improve as a passer in terms of his intermediate and deep ball accuracy, as well as the touch and feel that he has when he throws the football and the types of throws that he makes and when he makes them. I think it's still very feasible because of those physical tools, and maybe he interviews very well and he works out very well at the combine or in his pro day or private workouts. He's a guy that could go in the top 10. I wouldn't be surprised, because of the fact he's 6'7" and he's a good athlete with a strong arm, if he still doesn't end up being the first quarterback drafted in the 2016 NFL draft. But even though he could go in the top 10, to me, I think he's more of a 15 to 25 top talent. Again, as noted by the fact that I think he's only the third best quarterback prospect in this 2016 NFL draft. I think Wentz has better instincts, and I think Goff's accuracy is far superior. And as a result, I think there is a bit of a difference once you go, to me, Wentz and Goff are kind of like this. Lynch is a little bit lower down the totem pole. He could be a franchise guy, or he could be one of those guys that's ultimately always one of those big dick teases that you see the physical tools and you see the potential, and sometimes it looks like he's scratching the surface of it, but he never quite gets there. To me, when I'm looking at quarterbacks, it will take courage to take a Carson Wentz very high, and I don't want to sit there and dispute that or say that it won't. I mean, kid from North Dakota State who missed half of his senior season with a broken wrist, it takes courage to take a guy like that high. But I think equally as much it takes a lot of courage to draft a guy like Paxton Lynch in the top 5 coming from a school like Memphis. And there might be certain organizations that are very scared of this quarterback class because they see a lot of talent, they see a lot of depth at the position, but they know that in theory, in some teams' minds, the 2 best or 2 of the 3 best quarterbacks in this draft class came from schools like North Dakota State and Memphis, and that's probably going to scare a lot of organizations. So it could be a situation where you saw against Ole Miss that the lights weren't too bright, that Paxton Lynch was able to step up against an SEC team with a lot of NFL talent on the defensive side of the ball. But then when they played Auburn, when the lights were even brighter, it looked like it was a bit too big and the spotlight was a bit too much for Paxton Lynch. Like, he's a good prospect. If your team ends up taking him in round 1, you should have reason for hope. You shouldn't have a feeling like he's going to be a bust. However, you're going to have to temper your expectations, at least initially, because there are going to be some major growing pains, in my opinion. And it's going to take him some time to really develop into a big-time NFL quarterback, if he ever does at all.